Hey guys, welcome back. Today's the day we're going to at least start to get the prep work done, if not the entire job of putting the motor back in the Z1-R frame. The engine rather. I don't know I'm going to hear it on that one. Motors are electric. Okay, the engine's going to go back into the Z1-R frame. Now I say prep work because the way I do it, and again this is the way I do it, not necessarily the way to do it, is kind of involved. Because I want to put some redundancy in to prevent damage and catastrophic failure. So I kind of build that in as I go, in addition to the existing setup that I have. I'm going to show you that here in a minute. But the first thing we got to do is clean off the frame because it's been sitting in the shed. It's kind of dusty and dirty. I'm just going to use some glass cleaner and a rag because part of this prep work is we're going to be preparing these, or I should say protecting these down tubes from getting damaged from the engine going in. It's a pretty tight fit. I'll show you how it needs to go as far as the attitude of the engine related to the frame. And then I'm going to use some very thin cardboard, some wide painter's tape, like automotive painter's tape, the green stuff. We'll be using that, and maybe some duct tape and some other stuff to protect certain aspects of the frame and the engine too. Because no matter what you do, this is a precarious operation. It is very tight fit, and it has to go in a certain way. The first thing you'll notice is on a KZ1000, an old one at least, the earlier ones. I don't know about the later one, never did one. It has to go in from the right side because you have certain features of the mounting that's welded on the left side, so it can't go that way. So it has to go on the right side, and we know that because what I just said. As far as attitude of the engine goes, when you're going to do a KZ1000 engine, the engine has to be angled about 5 degrees or so down. In other words, the left side or the stator rotor side of the engine pointed downwards, about 5 degrees approximately, 5-8 degrees. And the engine actually has to go in at this kind of a trajectory, like you're in a glide path downwards on an aircraft. So it has to go in this way. It will not go properly any other way. And I've done this a number of times on these KZs, and this is the only way it works. And even that way, if you have that angle off a little bit, you sometimes need to make adjustments. Now I don't have a really good rig for adjusting on the fly, so I kind of set it up before I even start. And I'll show you that, and it is a little bit on the, I wouldn't say crude, but the basic side, but it does work, and I've used it a number of times. I mean, I can't, I'm trying to remember how many engines I pulled rather out of motorcycles, including the, the VFR doesn't count because the engine goes down, but these, these non-engine being a structural member or a stressed member of the frame, these type, style where you have down tubes and a cross frame and so forth, are the type I'm talking about. So yeah, it has to go that way, and that's the way we're going to do it. The other thing I need to do is, because this stupid powder coating is on here, is I'm not sure if the bottom of the motor, this is the rear lower where the engine bolts to, with the engine mount rather, I'm not sure if I need to sand or grind any of the surface off to make that fit. And it's going to be very difficult for me to measure it because that's what's in the that roll-around kit or frame thingy that the engine builder used. So I'd have to lift it out of there and measure it, and I don't know, I may end up just hitting this a little bit on the inside, but I hate doing that. I don't know if there's enough room for it. I kind of doubt it. That's a pretty tight fit. There's no thrust washers or anything that are spec'd out for this in here. That is the space that's designed for the bottom lower rear of the engine to go into. So I may end up having to just do it and say, oh well, because there's got to be enough clearance. And so again, yeah, these are the rear lower. We're not going to worry about the rear uppers right now. Part of that assembly, those pieces of metal, are actually out for powder coating with my customer right now, and we don't really need them to do what we're going to do here. We're going to have this one, we're going to have the two lower side ones, we're going to have the front one. That's going to be fine just to get the engine into the frame and just keep it in the frame. And we can make adjustments to get these to line up properly, because obviously it's going to want to sit down, and any clearance on these holes between the shafts, you said shaft, or actually the bolts that go through. So that's what we're going to do first, is, speaking of bolts, is make sure they actually do fit in the holes, because there's a stupid powder coating. And once we verify that, we'll wipe this thing all down. And then once we do that, we'll go ahead and get some cardboard and some stuff on the frame, and then we'll proceed to hopefully shove it in where it belongs. There's a couple of brackets right here that go on this left side. There's one that goes here on the outside, triangular shape. That would be this big guy right here. You can see witness marks from where probably the engine bolt was, because these are a little smaller, you see. And then this guy goes here, like that. Yeah, I painted and clear coated those in-house, so those are not stupid powder coating. So we got to do all that stuff. Now I'm going to show you my rig real quick. And I think that you'll find this interesting. This is the main hardware for my rig. These long bars with the eyes on them, the eyes have it, are designed to stick through the frame, attached to the motor, so I can get straps on the outside of the frame so this thing will push through. Obviously, if I have straps on one side, we're going to be hitting the frame. We can't go any further than that. So these give it a classic reach around, and go over here and you can get your left side straps on and then just lift it up. And it takes a little, adjustment and finagling to get this in so nothing hits, and then accommodate that 5 or 8 degree angle I was talking about, and then get the thing to slide in. Now I also did this not too long ago, after this, well actually just a few days ago, after the engine came back in from the frame. I made these guys. Now I've never done this before, and I'll admit it, but this is the only way I can see lifting the front of the engine up, is actually off of this rig that I'm going to attach to 3 on each side of the 8mm exhaust studs. Now before you get all crazy on that, let me explain my rationale. Normally I do shove it with a rod through here, or the actual bolt that it takes, and then I put those, I'll show you the pieces on those long bars that I normally go into here, and then they stick up a little bit, and then the straps, are obviously out here somewhere. But the trouble with this is, this has to be open so it'll sit down in there so I can shove the bolt through, the big long bolt. And normally what I do is I put a jack under it on the lift, and I bring it in and drop it down the jack. And then I use the jack to manipulate it in place. But it is real dangerous doing it that way, because I don't have a good access to the other side, because I'm standing on this side. And it's real easy to drive the end of whatever bolt you're using and the hardware of the lift mechanism into that welded boss on the left side of the frame and basically scratch the shit out of it. So this is what I came up with, and I think it's going to work fine. Okay, these guys go on here, and they get cinched down nice and tight. I'm going to make a spacer or some washers for up here, and so these are all going to be tightened up nice and tight, very stoutly, very firmly. They're going to be tight. Did I say tight? And so what this is going to do is, even though there's going to be a certain amount of forces going this way, and these are certainly not designed for lateral or thrust forces, they're designed for tension, and that's pretty much it. These being right up against the cylinder head itself are going to resist that, because there's not going to be a whole lot of opportunity for these to twist around. The only way these are going to break out is if you had it out to here, for example, and you had that kind of leverage on it. But being up really close like that and tight, and there's very little tolerance in there for it to move, well, I think that's going to work fine. On the end here is a 10mm thread for those pieces of metal that I'm going to actually show you here in a minute, that go to this, and I bolt that to it, and then I put that bar on that. So essentially the bar should go, the way I hook it up, I actually bolt these pretty tight so the bar kind of angles out and it'll stretch through, and it'll give us the clearance that we need. Otherwise, going up straight up and down, it'll hit here. But even if it does, what I end up doing is I just put some cardboard in here, and if it sets up against it, it's not a big deal. So I have another one for the other side. And I think it's going to work fine. I honestly haven't used it before because I just made them, and I don't think you're going to have any significant stress on these. You got to remember that this engine only weighs about 210, 215 pounds. That's the stock weight of at least a KZ1000. So, you know, let's go 220 to be safe. 220, 221, whatever works. And what we're going to do here is only be putting about a quarter of that amount of weight on each one of these if you divide it by 4, and most of the weight's back there anyway with the transmission and all the shafts and stuff. You said shaft again, but although there is quite a bit of weight this way because of the mass of the cylinders and the pistons and so forth, and of course that crank is very heavy, so there is some weight on this side. I realize that, but I think it's going to work fine, and if it doesn't, then I'm in big trouble. But I can't see any other way to do this. Now I have, for very short stints, to move this thing around, like for example off of this device here, the last motor, I have put a couple of straps around these and actually hoisted it from them just for a couple inches and just for a second, and I didn't have any problem with it whatsoever. So I really think that this is going to work fine, and it fits really well. I spent a considerable amount of time making these. So I machined the back flat so it goes up against there and has clearance, and then some relief on the front here so we can fit some nuts. As long as this is not sticking out past the tips of the studs, then it's not going to cause an interference issue, because obviously we know the studs fit past the frame. So I'm going to try it. Ugh. We'll find out in this video whether I'm a hero or a zero. These are the metal doodads I was talking about that reach down and go into the part of the motor through a long bolt. So essentially what it would look like on the end here. Whoa! So essentially what it would look like on the end here would be this. Or actually this. Sorry. It would go this way. So a 10mm bolt through there. This goes to the motor. This you can adjust back and forth because you have to have a lot of stick in. Not stick out, but stick in this way to get it over to the other side. And that takes some finagling of the straps and stuff to get it to that 5 or 8 degree angle down. And then these will go like that and bolt in. All right, so I think it's going to work fine. We're going to give it a shot, and like I said, that's what I mean. Now this one is typically the one I use on the fronts because it's got some relief ground into it to accommodate the space where it would normally go on that lower mount, you know, the one that goes here. But we're still going to use this one on the front because these typically clear on the back, no problem for the uppers. So that's where those are going to go. Those uppers will go through here. So we're going to pick it up from here, and we're going to pick it up from there. And one last thing before we finish jabberjawing about this. The customer advised me that he no longer wants to use this swing arm on this bike. Now I know you're spitting out your cornflakes right now, going, what did he just say? But yes, he wants to keep the original swing arm ultimately. So that's out for powder coating as well. And then luckily I have some new needle dick bearings for that original swing arm, because this is the original pivot anyway, and I've got all the other parts for it. We can just slip it on and put it back and no problem. Using these shocks with it, not 100% sure because these are 10 mil longer, because we were figuring, because of the extension here, the Hagen guy and myself, when we were talking about it months ago on the telly, and so I'm not really sure if that's going to work, but we got to make it work. All right, so but all is not lost. We are going to use this swing arm in a future project on the other KZ1000. Remember I mentioned that there's another KZ1000 that this engine builder, the one back there, that engine, did prior a couple of years ago? Well, that bike is set up, as I mentioned in that video, like a drag bike. The engine build and all that stuff is really designed in that genre of a drag racing bike, the bars, the whole bit. So this would really be a perfect addition for that. Not that he's going to drag race the thing, because why would you do that necessarily with an aluminum swing arm, but just the look. Now I should probably end up waiting for the original swing arm to come back and then do this engine install, because, you know, it's going to be a little more difficult to get in here to get this out, but not terribly. I can still do a classic reach around and get the stuff out in there. But I want to see if I was right. I want to get the engine in, take that sprocket cover off, put the sprocket on, and do an alignment check between this sprocket, because this wheel is set up where I anticipated it to be centerline wise. I want to align the two sprockets with a straight edge or something and see if I was right, because I need to know. And so yeah, I got to know. So that's what we're going to leave this on for right now, but eventually it's going to come off and the original is going to go on. All right, so enough chatting about this. Off camera, I'm going to get this all wiped down. Then I'm going to, off camera also, I'm going to get all this taped up with some cardboard and protected where I believe it needs to get protected. And then we'll come back and we'll start setting up the motor to hoist it. All right, so I got it partially hooked up to my come along up there and a couple of straps on it. And again, this is how I do it. I had to make new ones of these, so this is swing up. This is a new setup. And that, otherwise they'd be down too low and they'd interfere with the frame. This may not even clear, I don't know yet, but when we get it close, if it doesn't, then pull it back, put it back on the buggy here, the carrier, and reset, because then we'll just pick it up, these down there with the original brackets that I originally had made, these guys here. But I think it'll work. The only thing in my design as far as the flaw goes is these are not going to come out because the frame is too close to it. So I'm just going to leave them in. No, what we're going to do is get the back lower one into that mount over there. And once that's in, we'll just tip the motor up. That's why I have a jack underneath there. Plus we can just use two of the straps, the two front straps. We'll pick the motor up, run the jack up to support it, or just use the jack. It'll angle up pretty high. We should have enough clearance to pull all that stuff out. This will just come out, you know, normally because it's screwed in on the ends. But as far as these coming off, they have to clear the studs. And they're not going to do that if it's right up against it. So I think it'll work. So we're going to give it a shot and see what happens. We'll just take the oil filter off for now. Otherwise, we got a little clearance issue. There we go. That goes through. There we are. Now we should be able to get her all the way in. Almost there. This is where we gotta get the jack over to one side so we can allow it to lean over when it comes down. Take that 5 degrees out or so, like that. Oh, you know why? I'm moving the motor the wrong way, dummy. That would help. Motor doesn't go back, it goes forward. Now, let's go ahead and get a nut on this. Now we're going to lose the rear ones. Straps, that is. We don't need those anymore. We've got a pivot in the back. Alright, now. Oh yeah, we can get those out, no problem. Should be able to let this off. There we go. And we'll have no problem getting those out. Take this out first. These collars lock it in place here. You see these collars? They keep it from sliding laterally, you know. Now we gotta undo these 10s on the side. carefully. All right, 12 millimeter. Plenty of room. I figured there would be. There's a lot of headroom once the bottom rear is in place to, you know, scissor this thing up in the air a little bit. All these bolts go in from this side. I looked it up in the parts fish, so we're going to get that one started and pushed across once we line it back up, because right now we're high. Well, not really high, but, you know, high enough. All right, that big long one is through. Just needed to wiggle the motor a little bit. Sometimes it's a little bit off. You know, there is a little bit of play in there, designed for such a purpose. Now we're going to get all this tape and cardboard out while we can, and just get it out of our way. We don't need it anymore. It seemed to work pretty well. I don't see any major issues, or any at all, as a matter of fact. Of course, there probably is some, knowing my luck, but that worked out pretty well. Now, it took me quite a while off camera to get this leveled, and essentially you have to offset the hoist over to the side, because you've got such a long stick in that way and a short one out here. So I used a jack on that lift table and started jacking it up, and got it so when this thing moved over a little bit more and more and more toward this side, then it would you know, even out that way. Now we got to do this one, which is that small bracket right here. This does not have all the correct bolts for this. It needs to move over a little bit. You see, what happens is you push it over and then this gets flush. Otherwise it was toward me a little bit more, you know. So it wiggles around. That's why you got to have a jack underneath it, because if you have the weight of the engine on whatever hardware you got in there, you're not going to be able to move the damn thing. So now, let me bring you down here about something here. All right, on these KZs you got these two threaded pipes that are welded into the, you know, the frame. They're threads for this guy. Whoops, which way does it go? This guy, all right? For that bracket, for that to hold in. Now these are notoriously buggered up, and these were no exception. So you might be tempted to run a tap through that. Don't run a tap through these unless you have to. I made a chase tool that's just a regular bolt with a relief cut in it, and then chase them, because if you run a tap through, you're going to take threads, and then your thread engagement is not going to be as designed. Now these were buggered up too, but I ran a chasing die over them, so they should be fine. I've tested them already. You can snap these in a New York minute, and the threads don't go all the way through those tubes, so you can't use a long one. I mean, I like using a long one when I can, but this time you can't do it. I got all the bolts in and stuff that's going in at this point. Remember, over here, the upper one, there's brackets that bounce. What am I thinking? There's parts that go in here and then go through, and there's spacers over here. I got all that in a baggie. You can put these on afterwards, don't matter. But right now we're down in that main one on the bottom, which is fine. And we've got the main one on the top, and we got the two on the side. So there's not going to be any problem. Now, I wouldn't run it like this, but you know, we have to do what we got to do to get it back in the frame and then move it around. Because like I said, these parts are out for powder coating, because it has to go. It had to get back in the frame. Now we got to get this done. It's a shame we're going to change out this swing arm, but you know what? We can take a look at that after we get these things tightened down. Let's pull the sprocket cover back off, put the sprocket on real quick, and see how we line up, because I'm really curious to see that. Right now we can lose the jack, because I got the other one in on the other side. Let the engine settle where it wants to live. And again, don't impact these. Don't impact these guys. Just use a, god dang it, that's a 13. Engine bolts on this thing are 13 millimeter. I can't find my 13 ratchet. I had it out just a little while ago. Alright, that's good enough for now. My ratchet wrench, my gear wrench, 13 is MIA. So there's that big one that's going to go in the back when we get that other part done. And there's a big nut for it right here, so we'll put these together so we don't lose them. I'm going to try to source some new ones. See, the problem was all these engine mount bolts are not available brand new. I checked the parts fish. None of them are available, even the shorter ones. These guys, none of them. So what I had to do is just reuse what we got. But eventually we're going to be changing all these out. Probably not the long ones, just a nut. Maybe I can get a nut But these guys, I'm going to try to find them either on eBay or whatever, and we'll change those out. But we can do that, you know, individually in the future. It's not like it can't be done later. We're just changing a bolt and a nut out. All right, so if you're going to do this, just take your time. It's not that hard. If you got like 3 or 4 guys and you can get a purchase on, you can probably just lift the damn thing in. But you know, I don't. I have myself, and that's it. I was going to get my youngest son over to help me with this, but couldn't do it last week because of the issue with that transmission thing. And by the way, we got to pull that cover. I want to check that alignment. I'm not gonna deny you that. And so I decided to do it myself because I've done this a number of times on a number of different engines and bikes, and I know my setup's kind of a Rube Goldberg, but I never showed you what I got above. Essentially just a little trolley system, and I machined all this and welded it up a couple of years ago, and it just runs on 3/4 inch bar, which is right into the joist rather, really far, and you could hang a lot more weight than this on that. So it doesn't run that smoothly, but I'm sure you saw from the video I had to push it and kind of jerk a little bit, but it's not a big deal. You get used to it and you do it a number of times, and then it's not a big problem. And then yeah, so not bad. Like I said, I don't see any damage whatsoever from it, and the engine is in good enough for now, so we can move it around. I can put it back in the shed or something, probably put it out here on the floor because I want to do more stuff on it, and then finish this up when finish this part up when those parts come back from the powder coater. Probably have to loosen the motor back up and put a jack under it again and kind of move it around. And I think you saw that I took off the oil filter cover in the midst of this. Usually I do it beforehand. I forgot, because it just gives you a little bit more clearance. Now you don't have to if you have the proper angle. I couldn't get any more angle on this. I maybe had about 3 degrees, maybe 4 tops. If you got like 5 to 10 degrees or 8 degrees or so, that'll slip right by. This will go by, and I had the cardboard up here, and this cardboard works really well for this, by the way, the cereal box type cardboard, and I just slipped it underneath there with no damage to either side, so that's how I did that. Yeah, so anyway, let me off camera, I'm gonna take that sprocket cover back off. Well, I'll throw the sprocket out, we'll see how we line up, because I'm just dying to see. I know this is not going to stay on here, but I'm just dying to see if I was right when I kind of guessed at the alignment. Alright, so now we're looking down the throat of the beast. You can see the front sprocket and just the back sprocket, so it looks like it aligns pretty damn good. It might be a little bit to the left, but that could be dialed in with spacers. Because remember, I kind of guessed at this. It would be, and plus I don't really have the rear wheel aligned, even, so it might be cattywampus that way. That would definitely have worked, because you got a little spacer in here, in this one. Can manipulate that a little bit. I'm not sure if there's another one in there or not, I don't remember. And this one we most certainly can. This is just the width, the exact width of the brake, the rear brake assembly that slips over here. I measured that and machined this so the thing would be lined up right. So we can play with it a little bit with spacers, especially if it needed to go that way, because it's the only thing that's important is the relationship between here and here. So if this thing needed to move over, I just put it on the mill and I'd face it with, or not face it, I'd fly cut it on the mill. Yeah, but we don't really need to do that because obviously we're not using this on this bike now, unless he changes his mind again. I don't know. Customer's always right, remember. But yeah, I think now it lined up just fine. If anything, I don't know, maybe it's, I don't have a straight, you know what I do have though? Let's do a string. Yeah, let me see, I gotta see this. Let's put a string on one of the teeth, run it across the flat of this and see where it lands up front. See if we can keep that on that tooth. I gotta scoot you around here a little bit. I'm telling you right now, guys, this thing would have worked perfectly. Look at this. See the back? The string is right up against the sprocket and it's not being wrapped around it. And then up here I'm right up against this one. I think that would be just about perfect the way it is if we were going to do it. Maybe a little tweaking, but I wouldn't know until I got a chain on it. So yeah, we did good on that, which leads me to believe that it'll work on another KZ1000 because, you know, even though this is a D1, you know, the A1, A2, or I should say the A2 and so forth of the early KZs is pretty much same frame, so this will work in that. I think it'll work great in that situation. So yeah. Oh, well, I'm tired, guys. That's it on this video. I'm going to edit the crap out of this one and do some time lapse and so forth on those files that I hope it's not too large. Sometimes we do a large file on an iPhone, it doesn't even want to import it into the software, so may have to use another program to break it up. Anyway, I'm going to edit all this down so it's a little quicker, but this is how I do it as far as putting a motor like this back in a frame, especially when it's a high dollar motor, high dollar frame, you know, at least the finish goes. Stupid powder coating. You can tell I really like powder coating, right? And you know, I don't want to do any damage to it. So yeah, I'm real happy with the way it came out. That tool I made worked great. I had to make some adjustments and make some new brackets where it reaches to my bars that I showed you, but that didn't take me more than about 10 minutes on the milling machine and using a drill and stuff. Throw it in the vise and boom, done. So yeah, anyway, we're done. If you liked the video, don't hesitate to give me a thumbs up. That helps my analytics, helps me out a lot, helps the channel. Subscribe if you want to see more on the Z1-R as we progress along on putting it all back together, all the electrical, the whole bit, because I got a brand new wiring harness we need to string on this as well. And of course, ring the bell and you get notified if I put more crap like this up. So until next time, don't just repair, restore. Thanks for watching. Catch you on the next video.